Good evening. Welcome to Anchor of Hope. Let's start by singing song number 458 in the Zion's Praises. Number 458. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us who wait before thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of comfort sweet, near to the heart of God, a place where we our Savior meet, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed Redeemer, led from the heart of God, hold us who wait for thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of full release, near to the heart of God, a place where all is joy and peace, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us before thee, near to the heart of God. Number 446. 446. Faith of our fathers living still, in spite of dungeon, fire, and sword. Oh, how our hearts beat high with joy whene'er we hear that glorious word. Faith of our fathers, hold
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. So good to see each one of you. A lot of familiar faces, and I think probably in some dimension we're here because we're interested, first of all, in hearing the story of what happened in Haiti back in 21, but perhaps at a deeper level, what the Lord did for them. And I also, it crossed my mind how back then, we heard about this situation, and remember there were multiple times, at either prayer meetings or church services, that we prayed for these hostages in Haiti held by a gang, and it sounded so hopeless, and there was such reason for uncertainty of what would happen, the instability in the country and so forth. And it's been a blessing to be able to meet Ryan and Melody here tonight, spend just a little bit of time with them. And thank you, Ryan and Melody, for your willingness to come and to share and to be here with all of us. As to what to share, I wondered what to share. And it seemed like, thinking of the event there in Haiti, it seemed like it's kind of this situation on one hand of such, on the part of the gang and the evil and so forth, such great depths of depravity. And on the other hand, the so to speak, parting of the Red Sea and the way, the Lord provided them the escape, such miraculous power of God. And I couldn't seem to think of, what could I share that embodies both? And I've been rolling it around my mind for a little while. So tonight, before Ryan's were here, I told my family, what scripture do I read? Where do I pull from? And my daughter said, Psalm 23. I said, that's what I have been looking for. And so Psalm 23 it is. It just sort of speaks to this well. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I don't envy Ryan and Melody and the others who went through this, but it would be interesting to be able to get in their shoes the way that this probably became so literal in that time back in Haiti. That thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. The song, Faith of Our Fathers, and thank you, Wyatt, for the songs. Very beautiful, lovely hymns. But tonight, sitting here, as we'll be listening to Ryan sharing his account, and reflecting on the goodness of God, I would remind us all that had the Lord, for some reason, sovereignly allowed the story to end very differently, he's actually still just as good. And that is a sobering truth. Faith of our fathers, I thought of just the heritage that we all have of someone who saw the gospel as greater than themselves and gave their life to it, and we're the beneficiaries of it, whether it was a dad, a mom, grandpa, grandma, uncle, aunt, friend, neighbor, pastor. We all have that, and we're grateful for that. So wherever God has you, may tonight encourage us in our walk with the Lord to be faithful to Him. I might invite you up, Ryan, and pray with you, and then just turn the time over to you if you don't mind. You can make your way up here, and I'll pray for you and turn the time over to you. I urged Ryan to ignore the clock, to, take all the time you wish, Ryan. Ryan and Melody make their home in Wisconsin. For those of you who are from Anchor, you might remember Grant being here. It's Bontrager, correct? Grant Bontrager being here in maybe 2019. I didn't look back to get the exact dates when he shared his life story and testimony. How many of y'all remember that? Yeah. So Ryan would be a first cousin to Grant. Isn't that interesting? It's just, I love that connection. It was from Grant that I got Ryan's phone number. So we owe gratitude to Grant. They make their home at the Shiloh Mennonite Church in Ladysmith, Wisconsin. And they have 4 children, which oldest 2 would have been with you in Haiti, right? Andre is 7, Laura is 5, Bryce and Jethro are here with them tonight. Bryce is 3, Jethro is 1. So yeah, that's a little bit about them, and feel free to share more if you wish. So let's pray, and then I want to turn the time over to Ryan. Lord, I pray for Ryan tonight as he's going to share just the account, the story, the events that took place in Haiti, and I pray that you make it easy for him to share. I know we're probably many or most of us are strangers to Ryan, but I pray that just in the bonds of the Lord Jesus Christ, the friendship in the Lord Jesus Christ, that you'd make it easy for Ryan to share with all of us. We all care. Thank you for your faithfulness in their hearts and lives, for their service more recently in Liberia. Pray that you would just bless them, bless Ryan as he shares, help us to enjoy our time together, make it easy for him to share. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Bless you. Thank you, Ryan.
Good evening. It's a privilege to be with God's people. And when Melvin was telling us what he was going to share for devotions, I began to wonder if he was going to share the same verses that I had. But if you have your Bibles, I would invite you over to Psalm 34. I don't have time to tell you everything this evening, and so won't hear it all. And I wouldn't be able to remember everything to tell you even if I had the time. So I'll try to give a little time for questions at the end. So if I say something that doesn't make any sense, you can question me on it, and I'll try to give you some clarity. Psalm 34, I'd like to read the first 8 verses. And verse 7 is kind of the one I'm honing in on here. Verse 1, I will bless the Lord at all times. I wanted to mention that I just learned recently, this was probably written by David shortly after he escaped from Gath. He fled there, fleeing Saul, and realized that the people in Gath knew him as the person who was a threat to the king of Israel. People in Israel were saying Saul has slain his thousands, David his 10,000s, and basically it seems he was looked at as more powerful than the king of Israel, and so David realized that this put him in a dangerous position in a Philistine city. And so he pretended to be out of his mind, and they sent him away because of that. And now this is what he told the Lord after that. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. That verse 7, we sang that verse probably every day, but on average, probably more than once a day. And that was our prayer. We believed that God was around us, and that was our hope, was that he would eventually deliver us. And that is what finally happened in his own good time. So there was 17 of us who were kidnapped there that day. But I'm not one of 17 hostages. I'm one of thousands. That's an ongoing thing. It's happening today. It's a huge problem in a country with very little law and order. And so I want to just say that on behalf of the many others, the many Haitians who are suffering because of that. And there has been a handful of white people who were kidnapped, but a large majority of them are their own people there. And we were stopped on a main highway. It was the highway between the capital city and the border of the Dominican Republic. So it was a blacktop road just like the one out here. It was a main route. We weren't off in the backwoods somewhere. So that gives you some idea of the control these gangs have in the city. And today, it'd be a lot worse. Today, the compound where we lived has been taken over by gangs, and they've dismantled most of the buildings there. So nobody's been there to see that, but that's just what you can see from Google Earth, whatever. So it hasn't gotten better there in the last 5 years. Doesn't seem like. But there was 17 of us in one van. We had been to an orphanage to visit. It's an orphanage that CAM had sponsored, although they really didn't have any involvement. But they kind of needed to get a little update on their progress every 2 years, and so it was our chance for a day out to go and see some of the country and also to get a little update on what's happening at that orphanage. And then we were on our way home when we were stopped, and our driver turned around. He was a little quicker on his toes than I am. He turned around and tried to head the other way, but they overtook him and pulled in ahead of him and forced him to stop. And there was 4 men in the back of a pickup that stopped us, all with machine guns or automatic, whatever, AK-47s or whatever they were, ugly-looking rifles pointed at our faces. And so I don't know what their original intent was. we assumed they would rob us, but we didn't actually expect to be kidnapped that day. They waited around a little bit, they got us off the highway and then took us back in off the highway quite a little distance, which we were not happy for that. We had heard things like the police won't go back in there. And so I guess my assumption was that the highway was relatively safe, but back in there you were on your own. And that's kind of how it felt. There was a lot of those guys, and of course I really didn't understand their language. I'd only lived in the country for 4 months, so lest you think I'm an authority about Haiti and what happens there, I have not spent much of my life there. And so they stopped and deliberated for a while, and I guess got instructions from higher up. Took us back to a little house kind of at the end of the road where they had some other prisoners there. They took out 2 of their prisoners that were in the back room who were tied hand and foot. They came hopping across the yard because they couldn't walk. Their feet were tied together. And, you know, a lot of what they do is to intimidate. They lined us up along the wall and took a video of everybody lined up there. And, of course, in the video they're saying that this is a final video. We're going to kill these people. And I didn't understand that either, so that was actually kind of nice. When they contacted our director, they told him that we want $17 million in 24 hours or we're going to kill all these people. And so that's the way they talk. That's the kind of things that they say, but the people who deal with them know that those are just a starting place. There's a lot of negotiation that can be done. So they put us in a room that was quite a lot smaller than this platform that I'm standing on, maybe about 8 by 10. They put all 17 of us in there and shut the door and leaned their fence post up against the door to barricade it. And there we were, and there wasn't much oxygen in there, but we were actually thankful to be together. That was our greatest fear, especially in those early hours, was being separated and not knowing what's happening to the rest of our group. It was my wife and I and our 2 small children. Our daughter was 8 months old, and there was some other children there, a little older. There was some single staff. There was a lady without her husband who he had stayed back at the base to study for the next day's sermon. There we were. And as time wore on, they brought us supper, and it became apparent that we were going to be there for the night. And that just looked pretty unwelcome. To think of spending a whole night in that place, it was not a happy thought. I thought surely we could resolve this quicker than that. But that's the way it was, and as it got dark, we started trying to make ourselves comfortable, and there wasn't room for everyone to lay down at the same time, so we kind of took turns. There was a couple mattresses there, and some people slept, some people sat up, some people laid on the mattress and put their legs up against the wall, or up the side of the wall, so they took up less floor space. And the night eventually passed, but we did make a phone call, talk to our director before the night came, and I thought he could talk his way out about anything, but he failed us that time. And the details of the day-to-day, I can't really remember a lot of those. But we did a lot of praying. I think we settled on about 3 prayer meetings a day. One in the morning before breakfast came, and then one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and one just as it's getting dark, as it's time to go back into the house for the night. They did let us pretty much live out in the yard, which was nice. There was a little bit of shade there, and it was a little cooler than the house. So we spent our days outside in the yard with guards there watching us. And they really didn't bother us. They wanted to talk sometimes, but they didn't harass us or anything. And so we had our 3 prayer meetings. They'd bring us breakfast, along toward lunchtime. And then they'd usually bring us supper pretty late in the day, right shortly before bedtime. And that's what we ate. So, yeah, we spent a lot of time just sitting there, talking. A lot of the time we were a little bit hungry, some of us at least. And so we might talk about food that we would like to eat, and talk about things that we remember, and ask each other about families and jobs and everything you can think of. We had time to kill. We had a little shower there, which was a stick frame with a tarp stretched around it, no top. And you could take a few gallons of water in there, and with a little dipper you could pour it over yourself. And there was usually some soap there. And you could have a shower every day, and you could wash your clothes. So my habit kind of became to take a shower late morning and then wash my clothes and just put them on wet. And then I just wore them wet all day. It felt pretty good, actually, to have wet clothes, and by bedtime they were dry, pretty much. So I didn't have any extra clothes. Some of them did they brought a few things, and a few people used them, but I wore the same pants and shirt for 63 days. I also wore my contacts for 63 days. I'm a faithful, I don't know what you call it, but I take my contacts out every night because I about can't open my eyes in the morning if I don't. And so that first evening I thought about, contacts, well, I suppose they're going to have to go. But I just never quite pulled them out and threw them away. And eventually we went to bed and got up, and a little bit of dry eyes in the morning is not as bad as not being able to see very well. And so we got by the first day, and after a while I hardly thought about it anymore. And yeah, they stayed in that whole time. It never gave me any trouble at all. I don't know if some people do that, I think, but it's never worked for me except that time. So I guess I consider that a miracle for me. So in addition to what we did, we decided that we needed to have a prayer chain, and we would take turns. We kind of ordered ourselves in a particular order, and then we had one young man with a watch, and so we had a prayer chain, and you would take the watch for 30 minutes and pray off by yourself, and then you would give it to the next person on the list, and he would go and pray for 30 minutes and hand it off. I think we did 1 hour stretches during the night, so less people had to be up and around. And that we didn't start it right away. It's probably a few weeks into it, but for I think the majority of the time, we kept that up night and day, except for a few times, and the night watchman fell asleep. And so that was a blessing, to just pray for half an hour or whatever. You know, we don't often discipline ourselves to do that, I guess. At least I don't. But that was what you had to do for that hour, and so you had to get a little bit creative. What are you going to pray about for half an hour? There was kind of one thing that was foremost in your mind, but it didn't take half an hour to say it. And so for me, it kind of became a time of just reflecting on who God is. And, you know, those mountains that we can see over there, God made those, and God made the plants around us. And there's details about all of those things that no one has ever even discovered yet. And there's a lot of details that have been discovered. And, you know, this is God. This is the God who created the universe. And I'm talking to him. I'm communicating directly with him. And it was good for me to think about that and to help get myself kind of down to size, to where maybe I was a little more on the level that I should have been with talking to the creator of the universe. And so those times were a blessing, but there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know much. There was just a few times when we were able to make contact with someone, and we heard a few things, but we definitely wondered if the world had forgotten about us. We sat there a long time. Thanksgiving Day, we'd been there a month. Well, no, we'd been there more than a month. And we started to wonder if we're still going to be here at Christmas time, at New Year's. How is this ever going to end? They moved us. We didn't really know why, but they did move us to another house. That house seemed like they were just starting. We were the first hostages they kept there. And we kind of had that place all to ourselves. There were no other people there except a few guards. And they set it all up. They dug us an outhouse and got everything set up for us. They had some solar panels and some batteries and some fans that at least ran part of the night. But it seemed like we ran the batteries too low too many times, and eventually that all gave out. And we definitely saw some real darkness there, some Satan worship and things that we didn't fully understand, but you know, it was definitely one of Satan's strongholds. These people were servants of Satan, and they weren't ashamed of it. They were proud of it. If you ask them, they would tell you. And he was their hero, it seemed like. But then they brought in a whole bunch of God's people and parked them there. And so there was some conflict there. And I don't know what all they thought or observed from our group. You know, our talking was in English, and they didn't understand any English. And so when escape time came, we talked in front of them, basically. I mean, we didn't worry at all about them comprehending what we were saying, because they had basically zero comprehension of English, mostly. There was a few that had some. So they eventually moved us again, and we really wondered what this is all going to mean, because by that time, we were seeing planes circling way up in the air, and we felt that they probably were at least looking for us if they hadn't found us yet. And so we really wanted to stay there. Didn't want to move again in case they had located us, but they would always move us at night. And we sometimes would we would just line up and walk figure eights in the yard just to try to be visible, get some attention if possible. We didn't know what all might be happening. When they moved us away from the second location, they actually moved us right back to the first location, and that was kind of a comfort to me. It's nice to go back to what you're familiar with a little bit, and nice to know that these guys aren't just limitless in their resources. They're more or less a small-time bunch. So we went back, and by that time we had the whole house to ourselves. Previously we were living kind of out of the back room, and we were also actually allowed to sleep in the yard, which was kind of nice. It was cooler. But then after they moved us away, originally we always were shut up in the house. And when they brought us back, they gave us the whole house, which was 2 rooms. And they had more mattresses, and they brought us a little rug that was like, I don't know, kind of like an imitation bear skin or something. It's a nice fuzzy little thing, and it was supposed to look comfortable to us, but to me it just looked like we're planning to keep you here for a long time, and I didn't like that. But eventually there was some health problems among us, and one couple was allowed to leave. They took them out at night, and they were gone. We didn't know where they went, but they said they were going to take them out, take them to the embassy, and we sure hoped they did. And we kind of asked the guards the next day, what happened to them? Did they make it? Whatever. And yeah, they said they did. And so we sure hoped that they had made it out. But then there was other people with some health issues, and eventually we kind of brought it to their attention, and hey, can you get these people out of here? They're really suffering a lot. And eventually they did. And we talked about escape. We talked about everything you can think of, but we talked a lot about escaping. But we knew we had some real distance to cover, and we just weren't, some of us weren't in good enough shape. There was those health issues that basically ruled it out. But all of a sudden, they had a second release. 3 people were able to leave. We're down to 12 people now. And these 12 people, 2 of them are my children, which we carried, but the other 10 are able-bodied, able to walk. So, all of a sudden, escape was sort of back on the table. And we've been there so long, and the guards were so lax, and it just felt like we could almost just walk out. But they did bring in more guards during the night. There was a heavier guard presence at night. And so it was still a bit of a question of whether or not it could be done. But yeah, believe it or not, in a small group like that with hard things to face, you would think we would just be tight-knit and all working together and supporting each other. But actually we started to have some church problems over this escape business, because some people thought we should have done it a long time ago, and some people didn't think that it was was the right thing to do, because basically the rules were that if a guard loses his prisoner, he's going to lose his life for that. And some didn't feel that that was right. And that is something to definitely to consider. So we kind of batted this thing around, and it got pretty warm, and some feelings got hurt a little bit, and it just felt like this is never going to work. We're not going to be able to find a solution that everybody's happy with. And so we're 2 months into this now. We're at 60 days. And it just feels like there's no end in sight. What we didn't know was that a week plus earlier, when the second group was released, a full ransom, agreed upon ransom, had been paid, and the money was delivered. I thought you had to have a middleman, and you bring the people to the middleman, you bring the money to the middleman, and he does the swap. But no, they want the money. They count the money, and it's got to be in their hands before they bring any people. So they're completely in the driver's seat, and sure enough, they let 3 people go, and then they said, no, we're keeping the others. Our leader is in prison. He wants to use them as leverage to get out of prison. And so they breached their agreement, and the guys on the ground, they were tired of us, I think. They just wanted us out of there. And there was talk, there was, a little bit of, hey, you guys need to talk to your people and get them to pay, and so you can have a nice Christmas, so we can have a nice Christmas. But we weren't really willing to put pressure like that on the people on the outside. And so time just kind of drug on, and then once that thing fell through, everybody just kind of got quiet. Nobody put pressure on us anymore, because everybody was kind of stuck. And so that's how it was, and our parents knew this too. They thought it was going to be over a week plus back, and then it fell through, and now what? The ransom was paid. What more is there to say? The Haitian police were not willing to release their leader, period. And so there was not really anything more to talk about. But it seemed like maybe God wanted in on the action. God wanted the glory of this situation. And I'm glad that we can give him the glory. Everybody was at their wits' end. The people who thought they could solve this problem were stumped. The people who were supposed to be negotiable had done their negotiating, and they were licked as well. And so we didn't know all this, but that was what was going on. So one day we're just kind of going about our lives, such as they were, and we had this little argument, and things were a little tense. And so Wes, one of our single guys that was with us there, he had snuck off out of the yard. The yard was bare dirt, but right on the edge of the yard was brushy, scrubby stuff. And our outhouse was right next to the edge. And he went to the outhouse, and from there snuck into the brush. And looked around. And he had done that a while back. He had ideas of tunneling from the house out into the brush and then escaping that way. Personally, I thought that sounded like way too long of a process and risky, risky of being caught. So he went that day for the second time out into that brush and did a little stomping around. And while he was gone, I just was just so ready for something to break loose. I prayed just a quick little prayer that because this escape thing is on the line, you know, this is what we're all thinking about and not agreeing on, and I just prayed, Lord, if you want us to escape, bring Wes back excited. If he's positive about it, then that'll mean that we should pursue it. If he's negative and just doesn't think it'll work, then that's a negative answer. And never mentioned it to anyone, but didn't realize that my wife had prayed something very similar while he was gone, right over that same time as well. And eventually Wes came out. I think he was in there for almost 2 hours. He came back out and just came sauntering across the yard from the outhouse, and he just had a grin on his face. And the first thing he said was, "That mountain is not that far away." And that sounded positive. He said, I was practically under that mango tree over there. That was further than any of us had ever gone before. And he said, we can do this. This is possible. And, well, that sounded good to me. But, you know, we got to get together on this. What can we do? And I didn't know how to convince those who were not ready or not interested, and wasn't sure what to do. I looked over at the guy sitting next to me and I said, "Dale, is God speaking to you?" And, "Oh, is he speaking to you?" And my first thought was to say, "I think so," but I said, "Well, I think I need to go and pray about it some more." And so I went to find a place to pray a little bit on my own, and we only had a handful of spots that were really good for that, and they were all taken at the moment. And so that left me the option of just kind of walking laps in the yard. And so I just kind of walked laps in the yard and tried to pray and understand what God would have. And God has interesting ways. I never experienced anything like this before or since, but on this tiny little porch in front of this little house, my wife and one of the single girls was, one was combing, I can't even remember now which, but one was combing the other one's hair. We didn't actually have a comb, we had a plastic fork. And so they were combing each other's hair, and they were talking. And we were a little short on subjects that weren't controversial. So, for whatever reason, my wife started talking about my cousin Grant and the story that he has. And some of you heard that story. But my mother had 3 sisters who were severely handicapped. They never walked or talked or fed themselves. for their entire life. They required complete care. And before the third one was born, the older two were eventually put into a state hospital because my grandparents were just about run ragged caring for them. And it was extremely hard for them to do that. It felt like they were kind of betraying their own children. And they put it off for a long time and finally did it. They finally dropped them off there. And they did not tell their other children because they were pretty sure that the children couldn't hardly have it. And they weren't sure if they could hardly stand it either. So they did it without telling their healthy children. They had 8 children total. At that point, they probably had about 4 that were healthy and normal. And so they came back, and their children, well, where are the babies? Where are our sisters? And so they explained to them what they did, and it was a shock for their siblings, but over time they kind of got used to it, and they would go back and visit as much as they could. But eventually a day came when the hospital contacted them and said, "We need to come and meet with you." So they came out and they said, "One of your daughters is pregnant. She's been raped there in the hospital, and they recommended abortion. Let's just take care of this quickly. Let's not endanger the mother's life." And by that time, grandpas were caring for their third handicapped daughter, who they cared for her entire life. And the hospital, I'm sure, gave them the worst case scenario. They said this child will almost certainly be handicapped. This mother is on medications that a pregnant mother should not be on. There's 101 reasons why this child is not going to be healthy. And it was a tremendous blow to grandpas. They knew better than anyone what goes into caring for handicapped children. Now they're above 60, and there might be another one. So they said, "No, we're not going to abort this baby." And their oldest son and his wife had 2 children and were not able to have more, and they said, "We'll take that child." And they did, and that child was Grant, and struggled a lot with questioning why God brought him here. And so, but he's come through a lot of that and been able to use that to help other people. He goes to prisons and talks to those guys and shares his story and tells them that there's hope for them as well. And as I thought of that story, I said, "Thank you, Lord, for grandparents that did the right thing when it was hard." And I always do this when I tell this part. But it hit me just like that. This is what I want you to do. This is your hard thing. And it sort of shocked me because I didn't really see it on that level. I felt like Grandpa had something bigger to face than what I faced. And maybe that was just perspective, I don't know. But all of a sudden I felt that God really wanted me to get my family out of there. We had the whole house, and there was only 12 of us. Basically, we all had a mattress to sleep on. The nights were getting cooler. We were getting more comfortable. We're kind of getting used to it. And it kind of bothered me that we were getting used to this. It felt wrong that we would just get used to living in this condition and be satisfied with that. And so all of a sudden, I felt that God wanted me to take my family out of there. And I felt I had a clear enough word from the Lord that was what I planned to do, regardless of what anyone else wanted to do. If they wanted to stay, that's fine, but I felt like I knew what I needed to do. So at that point, I just was overcome with emotion. I went in the house by myself and just sat there and bawled like a baby. And my wife came in and was startled to find me that way, and I told her what had happened, and we just sat there together, and we were just so excited. And one of us said, "It feels like we're halfway home already." And, well, about that time, it was time for our 1 o'clock prayer. And our oldest son was having a little trouble. It seemed like he was dealing with a lot of fevers. We didn't know what was causing the fevers, but it seemed like it was kind of constant, more or less. And right then he was really hot and feverish, and he went to sleep, but he only would stay sleeping if we stayed there and fanned him with like a styrofoam plate or something. So it was time to pray, and she said, "Well, you just go out and pray, and I'll stay here and fan Andre." And so we did, and I went out and just sat there, and one of them said, "Ryan, you might as well start on your end," because we would just go down the line and all pray out loud. And I said, "Well, I have something to say before I pray. I want to tell you something." And so I proceeded to tell him what I just told you. And I said, "I know what I need to do. I'm planning to leave at the first opportunity. I don't know if that'll be tonight, but that's what I'm planning to do, and all of you are welcome, not obligated." So, instead of prayer right then, we said, "Well, let's go around the circle and everybody state your position. Let's find out what we're thinking." And a number of them were very in favor of escaping, had been for a long time. There was a few that I wasn't sure about. I wondered if I was maybe going to divide the group even more than it was already. They were some of the last to talk. And when they did, they said, the one I remember the best, he said, "I never felt at peace about escaping until right now." He said that has changed for me. I'm ready to go. And so, all of a sudden, our group was 100% unified. We all had the same goal. And we were excited for the first time in a very long time. And we were ready to work together. And it was just so much fun to sit there and discuss how this is going to work, what we're going to do, who's going to do what we're going to take, what we're going to leave, what order we're going to go out in. We were barricaded in there, so we had to figure out how to move a post that was leaned up against the door from the outside and then get the door open, get out, and then we wanted to shut the door and put the post back so it looked like it always had. And so we just sat there and talked and figured all this out and made all these plans, and it was just so fun to have a goal in mind, something to work toward. We didn't know how it was going to work. It was deathly quiet around there at night, unless the generator was running. They had a little generator there, and they would run some fans for us in the house because it was really stuffy in there. Could hardly sleep, and they want to take good care of these Americans because they were going to get a fat price for them. But the generator hadn't run for several nights. It was low on oil, and it had a low oil alert that wouldn't let it run. And I just kind of expected that it probably wasn't going to run, and we would have to rely on God stopping the ears of the guards because there's no cover whatsoever for us to go stomping out through brush. It just can't work otherwise. But somehow we were ready to trust that one to the Lord. So we just made our plans, and we didn't know if it was going to work that night, but we had a time slot. We wanted to leave late at night, but not too late. We wanted to be able to make quite a distance before the sun came up. So we made our plans and headed off to bed early, and we were going to have a couple guys stay up and watch and kind of monitor the guards a little bit. There was cracks that we could peek out and see them. They sat. There had been some rain, and there was porches on two sides, most of two sides of the house. And so when it rained, they all crammed on the porch out of the rain, and the door we wanted to escape from was on the opposite corner of the house. So that was good. They used to charge their phones right by that door, but we got a pretty good rain the night before, and they had a power strip that they all plugged into. That it was there right down by the ground, and it had kind of gotten wet, and so they moved that over to the other side too. So they were largely headquartered on the other side of the house, and that was a positive. We had some barrels of water out back in the yard that we used for showering, and we just kind of casually repositioned the barrels a little bit to give us maximum blockage, to block their line of sight behind the house there where we wanted to leave. We did all these things and kind of got ready, figured out who was going first, and we had our order all figured out. Went to bed, and I didn't sleep. I was awake, I think, pretty much the whole entire time. And eventually, the guys who were the lookouts said, okay, I think it's time to go. So we got up and put our shoes on and kind of tried to almost make sort of like dummies in our beds so that if they happened to look in, they would see something in there, and hopefully it would convince them that we were still there till they opened the door in the morning. We usually woke them up in the morning because they were up late all night, and by morning they were all collapsed, sleeping, and maybe slightly intoxicated, and well, we needed the bathroom. So usually pretty soon after the crack of dawn, we were banging on the door wanting out, and they didn't always appreciate that very much. So we wondered if we weren't there to wake them up, how long they might actually sleep. So we made all our preparations, and they said, okay, it's time to go, let's do this. And there was a big rock at the base of the door, there was the post leaning up against it, and so they pushed the rock over, and it went whoomp, kind of down into a ditch. And, ooh, that sounded loud to us. And we were still kind of making our preparations, and all of a sudden they said the head guard just came around the back of the house, and he's looking, just everybody get back to bed. And so we did. We flopped into bed and kicked our shoes off and held real still. We kind of expected that he would come around in the front door and yell at us for a while for pushing the rock over. There was a decent amount of moonlight. He could see it, seems like. But he stood there and kind of looked at it for a while. Then he just walked away, went back to the other side of the house. I was in my bed, and I kind of figured that it was off for tonight. And next thing I knew, they were waking me up. They said, hey, it's time to go. We're going to go. Fortunately, not everyone fell asleep, but kind of caught me off guard because I didn't have my shoes on anymore. So I scrambled around, and we, that time, they got the stick moved and got the door open, and we just headed out across the yard there. And it felt kind of vulnerable, just the whole line of us. The last guys, they closed the door, put the stick back, put the rock back, made everything look like it had, and then came scooting in behind us, and we walked into the brush and walked across, and the brush really wasn't very high. You know, we were trying to kind of walk low and pick our feet up high because it was a real tangle that we were walking through, and I was carrying my 3-year-old son, and he was kind of asleep, kind of waking up, and he kind of, Mama. Now, I'm forgetting something here. So, as we're in the house, getting ready, making preparations, doing all, just talking, the guy came, the guy who brought us food, and that was a little unusual. It happens sometimes, but it was a little unusual that he would come at that time of day. And he came and stuck his head into the house and looked at us there, and I was sitting there fanning my son because he was feverish and fussy, and he made some comment about him being hot. And I said something like, yeah, you know, when the fans don't run, I don't get to sleep. I have to do this. And we had been telling him, you know, the generator needs some oil, you know, see if you could bring some oil. And, oh, yeah, that generator needs oil, doesn't it? And he pulls out his phone and makes a phone call. Yeah, bring some oil. And I was just astounded that's exactly what we needed for some cover noise, that generator to be running. It was right over by the outhouse. That was going to be just perfect, but I just kind of assumed that God was going to take care of it some other way. But the next thing I know, 30 minutes later, they're dumping oil into this generator, and it started up. And it was a huge encouragement, a huge faith booster, and it just added to the excitement. So that generator chugged away all night, and still running when we walked out of earshot. So anyway, we head out the door, across the yard, through the brush, and I'm trying to walk low and be quiet, and the little boy that I'm carrying is all of a sudden starting to wake up and cry. Because I can see these guys right on the other side of this little bit of brush. They're 60 feet away, maybe, I don't know. They're sitting there, they're wide awake. They're looking at their phones. You can see the screen, you can see their face from the light from their phone screen. I can still see it. I'm not a courageous person. I would normally never have courage for some adventure like that. But that night, it felt like the right thing to do. Very much so. We got over. We were going to meet under that mango tree, make sure the last guys caught up with us. That was just a little bit away, not very far, but that was where we were that was kind of our first place to regroup. That was our plan. And we got there and waiting for the last two guys, and they're right on our heels. They didn't mess around. So, let's keep going, and we headed out of the yard. And it seemed like we were kind of at the end of the road. The road stopped right there. You couldn't drive a vehicle further than that. There was kind of an irrigation ditch, or maybe just a drainage ditch, that you couldn't cross except on foot. And so we had come back in off one highway. Over at the edge of the valley, we could see the mountains, and we could see the other major highway where it started to climb the face of the mountains. We could see semis on the road. And that's the road we wanted to get to. We knew what that road was. We knew if we could get there, we could tell our director where we were. So that was our goal. I thought maybe it was 2-3 miles away. We didn't really know, but thought it'd be pretty doable. So we left, and it was easy walking. There was little footpaths. The sun was bright. The moon was bright. And it was just gardens, people's little fields there where they were gardening. And the path ran right between the gardens, so we wanted to go whatever it was, north and east. And this path went north, and that one went east, and that one went north, and it was just a perfect little zigzagging, just took us exactly where we wanted to go. The moon was bright, it was easy walking, and that generator faded out in the distance, and we just felt so good. That had been our reality for 63 days, and all of a sudden we're on our own again, making our own decisions. And we were glad to be doing it. We did some really, really fast walking. We had lots of energy for some reason, maybe adrenaline. But we ended up probably walking close to 10 miles that night. And we made really good time for the first while. Then we sort of eventually kind of came through, I don't know if it was a little village, but a little group of houses. And so that made us a little uneasy. We weren't really in a big hurry to be discovered yet. Didn't see anyone. No dogs came and barked at us, which is very unusual. There's dogs everywhere, and that not much escapes their attention, but no dogs barked. We were going to stay kind of close to one side, and I think I was about second in line. There was one guy ahead of me sort of making the decisions of where we're going to go, and we're walking, and we're going to hang to this side. I said, wait a minute, there's a little donkey laying up there. He's watching us. We don't want to startle him too much, so we kind of veered out around him and kept going, and it was quiet. We walked right through that little village, out the other side, and it's 3, maybe 4 in the morning, something like that. And we knew we could see the mountain where we wanted to go. We just kept pointed that direction. And eventually we got to a kind of a lake. And I was afraid it was a river. It was really wide, but it was really long too. And I was a little bit afraid we were going to have to cross a river. I hadn't really bargained on that. But we realized, no, it's a lake, and we started to go around it. And in that process, we got ourselves into a tremendous patch of thorns. And I never did see those thorns because about that time the moon went down and it got really dark. And it was, kind of in some trees too, so it was somewhat shaded. But wow, those thorns were serious. I have never, some of them actually, when you touch them, it almost felt like they jumped out and grabbed you, and they would like pin your britches to your leg. It was, and it felt like they had a fish hook on the end. It was miserable. And we floundered around in those thorns, and finally, we just didn't know what to do anymore. We could hardly go forward, and turning around was hardly an option. We couldn't see hardly where we came from. And so we didn't know what to do but stop and pray. And so we stopped and prayed. And then we forged on, just kept trying. And we spent, probably a good hour fighting those thorns. And it probably wasn't a very big area, but it took us a long time to get through it in the dark. And in those thorns, we had to stop a few times and pray and then keep on going. And in the thorns, we all of a sudden, the flat valley floor changed and it started to slope up and get a little bit rocky, and we knew that we were starting to climb out of that valley, so we knew we were making headway. And just as it was getting light, then we got out of the thorns and got onto a little road. Eventually we kind of skipped the road and went off kind of up over a hill. We sat on a little hilltop, just a grassy area, probably goat pasture. And the sun came up. It was just a beautiful sunrise. And we were just above the valley. We could look down, and there was mist hanging in the valley. We could see kind of where we'd come from, and it just all looked so peaceful. And we hadn't seen anybody yet. But we were within a very short distance of the highway by then, so we had to figure out what the next step was going to be. We had a few little bills of Haitian money that we were able to keep when they were robbing us. Perfect for a tip for somebody, borrowing somebody's phone, to make a phone call. A little something to give them to help them pay their phone bill. And so we decided that most of us were going to stay right there, kind of hidden, and two that knew the most Creole were going to go out to the highway and find somebody and try to get a phone and call. So that's what they did. And so they left, and we kind of watched them down over the edge, and we saw that pretty then they met a man, and we found out later, he told them, no, he doesn't have a phone, but if you go down there to that house with the red door, they'll have a phone there. Oh, okay, thank you. And so they continued on, and that fellow that they talked to came on up and found our group. And surprised to see a bunch of Americans sitting out on a hill, first light, you know. Wondered, are you the people that they've been talking about on the radio? Oh, probably. And so the other guys, they went to the house with the red door and kind of went around the back, because came from the back side a little bit, and went around to the front, and there was people there, and they said, could we use your phone? And they said, well, we have a phone, but it's got no credit on it. It's the way their thing works, you buy a little card, and then you scratch it off and enter the number, and then that gives you a little bit of credit. Well, could we give you a little money to buy a little credit and make a phone call, and then you can keep the rest, you know? And, oh, yeah, that'd be fine. You know, they were pretty relaxed. They weren't in a big hurry, and, well, our guys kind of were in a hurry. So they kind of tried to keep this thing moving, and so eventually they went down the street a little ways and bought some credit, brought it back, and we'd also, one of the times when we talked to our director, Barry Grant, they had brought my phone, and we called with my phone, and of course, I didn't really know, well, no, that time we didn't. That was the first time, but later on, the gang leader brought his phone. He was on the phone with Barry, and I could see the phone number on the screen. And so I said, okay, here's the number, let's memorize this thing. And so we memorized Barry's number so that we would have it in case we ever had the chance to call him. And so we still had that. So they brought the phone back, and they dialed the number, and Barry answered. And they said, hey, this is Sam, or whatever. And Barry just kept saying, hello? Hello? And these guys realized, they said, the mic doesn't work. You got to put it on speakerphone. Well, they didn't really want the whole world to hear this conversation, but what else do you do? So they put it on speakerphone, and then he was able to hear him. Hey, this is Sam. We got away last night. We need you to come pick us up. And Barry didn't waste any time. He said, okay, we're on the way. We told him we're on Highway 3 in Goat Mountain. And another thing about Barry, he can really drive. And wow, he's a very aggressive driver in that culture. I don't think he is here so much, but especially I suspect it was even a bit more aggressive that morning. But they were there in a fairly short time. It was probably a 20, 30-minute drive, and I don't think it took him any more than that. So those guys made their phone call, and they came back to us. One of them came back to us and said, okay, come, he's on his way. And it was just a little unreal. Is this really happening? Are we going to actually see Barry in a few minutes? We walked out to the road and kind of said good morning to these guys who had helped us at the house at the red door, and then we said, well, might as well, there's a police checkpoint just down the road, we might as well just walk down the road to the checkpoint and be there when he gets there. So we walked on down the road, and we didn't even get to the checkpoint, and Barry pulled up. And what a reunion. It was a wonderful time to realize what we had just walked through, what the Lord had just done for us. We piled into those vehicles, and police kind of wanted in on the action. They had sort of figured out who we were and kind of wanted to maybe get in on a little bit of the excitement or maybe the glory, I don't know. And Barry said, "No, we don't have time to talk to you. You can follow us if you want to come, but we're going now." And so we headed back to our compound, and on that ride we were able to talk to some of our parents. Barry had been in contact with them quite a bit over the course of the 2 months. They had become friends, and so several of us were able to call our parents and tell them the good news. Even the FBI, who had been monitoring us for weeks, Barry had the privilege of telling them that they're not there anymore. They escaped last night. They didn't figure it out on their own. So, yeah, we got back to our compound. The American Embassy came out. They wanted to look us over. They wanted to make sure we were okay. They looked in my eyes, and I told the lady that was peering into my eyes, I said, "That contact lens has been in there for 63 days. And she said, "Well, it looks really good." And so the FBI kind of seemed to want to get in on the action too. They sent a plane down to pick us up, and they took us out of the country yet that day. Took us to Florida, put us up in a nice hotel right across from their headquarters so that they could question us out a little bit and learn what they could from us. And we eventually got home in time for Christmas. So, people ask me, "What'd you learn from all that?" And I struggle sometimes to know what to tell people. But I thought about that. I thought maybe I would try to be proactive and have an answer ready for if someone asked me that tonight. What did I learn through that experience? And the first thing I thought of was God's timing is God's timing. It's not our timing. It was not at all our desire to let things play out for that long. But as we look back on it, we do see how God used that length of time to accomplish His purposes. And none of us can claim that we were the ones that solved that problem and got those people out of there. It was very clearly God that did it. And so, when God seems to be a little slow to act, I guess, just have to remember that God's timing is God's timing. And another thing that spoke to me during that experience is the power of unity. Sometimes in church life, we think if we can get a majority or, 2/3 majority or 75%, we have the majority, let's move ahead. But that experience kind of, I guess I saw firsthand what the difference is between a 90% majority and 100% unity. It just, whenever you have someone dragging their feet, it's just not the same as if the whole team is pulling together. And I would like to learn from that and somehow If we could implement that in church life, I think we would be amazed what could happen. Not sure if I have those answers yet, but it's something to think about. And the third thing I have is that God is still God, even when our world is kind of out of control. And that was from my personal prayer time, sitting there in a corner, just looking at that mountain and thinking about the God that created that mountain and everything between me and it and everything beyond it, and how great that God is, and how small my problems are to that God. And so when we think things are out of control, God's not out of control. He's still working. Recently we heard a CAM board member from Canada was in Montreal riding in a taxi and was chatting with his driver, and the driver said, and I don't know what all they said, but the driver proceeded to tell him that he was a Haitian who had emigrated to Canada with his family, but before that he had been kidnapped by the 400 Mawozo gang, and he was aware of the group of 17 Americans who had been kidnapped before he had. And I forget the details now exactly, but I believe he had read verses that somebody had written on the wall, and he still remembered what those verses were. That was one of our group. And it seemed that he was held in the same place that we were. Eventually he was apparently freed. But he said, you know, those guards were punished after those people left. He said they either got a bullet in the hand or the foot. For that was their punishment for letting those people get away. That was the story that he had. I can't verify that. But that really kind of made me stop and think, wow, that's the consequences of what we did. And I'm not saying that I'm sorry we left, but it is sobering, because those men were our friends to some extent. You know, we weren't able to carry deep, meaningful conversations, but we did exist in the same yard for quite some time. So you can pray for those people. You can be grateful for law and order in the land where we live. Things have seemingly only gotten worse in the years since then. So, thank you for coming. If you have a question, you can ask, and I'll try to tell you what I know. I don't know everything, but maybe you understood what I was trying to say. Yeah, the people out of our group who were released earlier, they took them and met somebody who took them on to the U.S. Embassy. And so they were able to be picked up at the U.S. Embassy. The first couple to get medical help was flown on to Cuba Guantanamo Bay, where there's a military hospital. They flew them up there with a helicopter that night, and then on home later. The other group, her husband, who was still back at the base, was able to go and meet her at the embassy, and they just went back to the base and spent another almost 2 weeks until we finally were able to come home. Yeah, somebody found it on the map. It's not that easy to find, but they did pin it, and I'm sure they still have it somewhere, but I probably couldn't find it for you just real handily. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I forget my directions now, but you're familiar with the Route 8 over to the DR border, and then Route 3 is kind of on the other side of that valley. Okay. Okay. Okay, well, I don't want to take more of your night, but thanks for coming, and God bless you.
Oh my, what a story. Thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing and for allowing us to sort of get in your shoes and walk that journey. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. There's a few things that come to my mind in thinking about trying to bring conclusion to the journey that, Ryan took us on. And that is that every single one of us are on a journey. You know how he talked about escaping and walking, and the moon was helping them until suddenly it wasn't there, and there were thorns and all these obstacles, painful obstacles. Life is no different. And there's coming a day, he referenced the reunion with Barry. And, I got goosebumps thinking about that, being in, so to speak, bondage as a hostage for all that time. And all of a sudden, you're reunited with someone that represents freedom and escape and friendship. The same is true for us. There's coming a day when we're going to be reunited with whomever we choose to serve. One thing that was absent in what Ryan was telling us was hatred for the enemy. That's because Jesus says, love your enemies. And I'm sure Ryan would say, we don't have to go to Haiti to find enemies. Sometimes they're close to home. My challenge is the words of Jesus. Start with Matthew chapter 5. Love your enemies. Do good to those who despitefully use you. Turn the other cheek. Go the extra mile. And make your calling and election sure that when you come to the end of your life, that you're reunited with Jesus Christ and not the prince of darkness that portrays himself as light. No one wants that. But it's in these tangled roads, these thorny paths, that we are shaping and choosing, in a certain sense, our destinations. The other thing that came to my mind is that we do well not to wait until we are a hostage in Haiti to cultivate a relationship with the God who will bring us through. We have opportunity today here, Versailles, Missouri, to be cultivating the relationship that will bring us through these kinds of trials. So I hope that that anchors us as we think about everything Ryan shared. And again, Ryan and Melody, thank you so much for your willingness to come and to carve out this portion of your trip to spend an evening with us. What we're going to do, I don't want anyone to feel obligated. Certainly Ryan's did not ask for this, and they don't know that we're doing this. But we want to lift an offering, just give an opportunity to lift a love gift for them. I thought it would be nice, just as a gesture, I think they had a wedding in the area that we timed the trip with. But just the time that it can take to prepare for these kinds of events, the modifications that end up happening to travel plans sometimes. And then also, as Ryan shared earlier, they served in Liberia since their time in Haiti for about 2 years. So what kind of stands out to me is they're familiar with, giving of themselves. And so I thought we could, however you feel led, we could give a gift of love, and I am confident that it will bless them in whatever way the Lord directs. So want to ask Wyatt, just maybe from right there, would you lead us in some type of chorus or song while we lift the offering? And then following that, would you come forward and lead us in a dismissal song? Would you be willing to do that? Okay, so on behalf of Anchor, thank you for coming out and for being here. And thank you again, Ryan and Melody. And I want to wish each of you the Lord's blessings as you return to your homes, your congregations. Serve God faithfully wherever He has you, and may God bless you and keep you. Why don't we have that chorus and lift the offering, and then a closing song.